CBC Radio Canada is facing declining viewership, especially among younger Canadians. The public broadcaster is caught between trying to compete with commercial platforms and delivering nonpartisan public interest journalism. Funding cuts and accusations of bias have only intensified the scrutiny. And the core issue, what should CBC's future look like? Digital first, leaner, more focused, or it reimagined altogether? That's a big one, Gary.
My question is, or my response is, all of the above.
All of the above, huh? Yeah.
All of the above. It's an institution that is adrift, and it's top heavy. I'll get into it a little more in a moment because I do have another graphic. But before we go to the graphic, actually, Monday, during an announcement the Prime Minister made in Kelowna regarding help for the softwood industry, or softwood lumber industry.
Right.
He was asked a question by a local reporter, and it all centered around like the digital services tax and how Google has arrived at a settlement where and they've been making some of the first payments, and money was distributed to a number of media organizations across the country. Some of which I scratched my head over were their large-scale operations, while the smaller 2 and 3 person operations in small communities across the country got a little bit, but really not a whole lot of money. And they're the ones that have been struggling because they can't use Facebook because Meta banned all Canadian news on Facebook and Instagram. So there's that situation. Anyway, the Prime Minister came at it with a kind of a different perspective in some respects, but this is what he had to say, and it also, he did bring up the CBC, and I thought it was very timely for the conversation we were about to have.
One of the roles of CBC Radio Canada is to provide unbiased, immediate, local information, particularly in terms of in situations such as you're referring to, and that's one of the reasons why we've made the commitment to invest and reinforce and actually change the governance of CBC Radio Can to ensure that they are providing those essential services. Now, to your specific question, I personally, and this government is a big believer in the value of what you do. I'm going to use you as a representation on local news, and the importance of ensuring that is disseminated as widely and as quickly as possible. So we will look for all avenues to do that. And I understand your question, and it's part of our thinking around that.
Okay, so let's talk about the CBC for a moment. Again, bring up a little bit of. There we go. Current annual budget, $1.4 billion. $1.4 billion.
A good chunk of change.
Yep. In 2024-25 budget, they received a $42 million temporary top-up. Now, that top-up came as they were laying off people and paying out executive bonuses at the same time.
Herein the problem.
Lower per capita funding versus other G7 public broadcasters. That one leaves me scratching my head.
Yeah.
Reform proposals indexed to inflation and population. Okay, well, yeah, index the funding to inflation and population. Population size. I don't know if you need to index it to population size, unless you're looking at percentage of the population served. Strategic goals, increased digital reach, and governance modernization. I can tell you where the governance modernization should come in. If we're going to keep a public broadcaster in this country, and don't get me wrong, I think we do need a good public broadcaster. However, I think the CBC has lost its way. It has become bloated at the top and is trying to be all things to all people on all platforms, even some that most of us don't even use and some of us haven't even heard of. And of course, there's always the cry of the liberal bias with the CBC, especially over the last 10 years where we had a liberal government in power, and we still do. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has said he will defund the CBC, but will leave Radio Canada, the French arm, alone. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm not sure if he's talking about increasing some funding to Rad Canada.
Right.
And there are more VPs and managers and what have you at the upper end, especially at their headquarters on Front Street in Toronto, than they would ever need. I often wonder, what are they doing? What are they doing? Anyway, so they've cut down on the front lines to a degree. And you still have at the upper end, although they do have a new president and CEO. And I watched a clip of her today. She did an interview with CBC Edmonton back in January, just after she took over. She seems to have some smarts about her. I actually was impressed with what I heard. And hopefully she's going to turn the ship around because it's drifting. They have to really start to look at the focus that they have, because they're all over the map, and they can't be all things to all people. Now, at one point there was a suggestion that, okay, let's shut down all of the TV transmitters and radio transmitters and just go strictly on the web. That would be great, except there are parts of the country where they're not served by private broadcasters, and the internet service that they have is less than acceptable. It's almost, at the speeds of dial-up, if it's available at all. Or, people are using satellite-based, and again, unless it's something like Starlink, which is, really expensive now, you have a lot of lag and everything. So shutting down all of the transmitters, I can't see that happening at this point in time. That's something, a future goal for sure. But you have to wait.
Got a lot of legacy viewers as well. Like, for example, my dad was a fan of CBC. He loved watching the news even twice a day. He had a hard time working a remote control on the television, let alone going online on the computer. So there's a lot of legacy viewers out there that if they, they can't just arbitrarily cut off that service either, right? They got to take that into consideration.
Well, exactly. And it's a slow process moving in that direction. But I can see where, as you're looking at the numbers, the people who are watching the streaming services, it's going, it goes in that direction, but you do it gradually, because you do have, as you say, the legacy viewers, and then we have the far ends of the country. Because if you're a public broadcaster, you, I think, are obligated to serve all areas of the country to the best of your ability.
Correct.
And I think that's where they have to sit down and really think about how they're going to achieve that. and have what a couple of the key goals are. I think they have to rethink what they're doing on the digital side of things. They're going in too many different directions. Bring it down to one or two and do those well. That will allow the greatest number of people to access them and access them easily. I don't believe in the CBC carrying commercials on TV. Totally against it. They're taking those commercials, and even though their viewership is declining, they're still getting commercials, and I don't know if they're undercutting the private broadcasters, but that's taking money out of the private broadcasters who aren't getting any great amount of government handouts like the CBC does. So, it's publicly funded. $1.4 billion a year and a $42 million temporary top-up. If you can't operate a decent public broadcasting service on, you might as well say 1.5, 1.6 billion, then maybe some of these people should just take the retirement packages and get out of the way. Yeah. Because I think it can be done and be done on a, saving money on the budget and still providing top-notch program. There is a role for a public broadcaster in this country, and especially now with the consolidation that has been taking place in the private media circles.